Hi, everyone, and welcome to Psychic Perspectives. We are doing a series called Life Lessons Learned Through Mediumship, but these life lessons are for anybody. It's not just those who wanting to develop or connect with mediumship or are mediums. These are life lessons that are important to all of us. So if you're on a spiritual journey and you're interested in learning more about what we've learned through mediumship experiences, be sure to like, subscribe, and join us. So let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychic Perspectives, our life lesson series. Today, we are doing life lesson number 2, and that is that death doesn't erase who we are. Ta-da!
Ta-da.
That's the
Right?
topic. And
Yep.
some of you will go, yeah, I know that. And of course, these are life lessons through mediumship, right? Through talking to spirit, through developing our mediumship, for having spirits coming through and telling us their story. And we've learned that your crap goes with you, right?
Yeah. It does. I mean, there's some caveats to it. I'm sure we'll be talking about it, but
Sure.
right.
So many people think they're going to get angel wings and then everything's going to disappear and everything's going to go away and they're all going to be okay. And I have to, I mean, they are okay, but you know what I mean? It's like we just get this halo and then nothing that happened in life matters anymore. And
Right.
we've just learned from connecting with spirits that just is not the case.
Right. There's not even like an all-knowing that I had hoped for, like this, oh, and now I know everything and everything
I'm going
is,
to have the answers to everything I want to have answers to, right?
yeah.
That's like saying when you magically become 18 and they tell you you're an adult now, it's like,
Uh-huh.
do you magically become a different person? No.
No, you
It's just
don't.
a number. And,
Yeah.
death is really the same way. It's an experience. And we talked about that in life lesson number 1, is do we die? So if you haven't watched that one, go back and watch it. I'll have a link here for it. But yeah, it's just an experience that transitions us into the next phase of life, right?
Right. There is a perspective change, and I think that's part of
Absolutely. And we want to talk about that, right?
yeah, like one of the things that I had already wrote down. Well, we talked about it before. If you're an asshole in life, you're going to be an asshole in death. But it's like you're a nicer version of it. It's like, and because of some of the, I guess, soul contracts and karmic cycles was part of the thing that I was going to bring up too, in the way that sometimes we act as catalysts in life for certain things, and on the other side it's just kind of a role that we had to play. So they might not
Right.
entirely be an asshole, but sometimes that is the case. Still, like, you still maintain a great portion of your personality is what it is, and that really comes through the readings, and that's kind of what you're talking about. So
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah.
No, and those are really good points. I hadn't even thought about the soul contract stuff because it's so individualistic. And I think that's what people need to realize about this experience. First of all, is you don't get your angel wings. You're not going to know everything. Your stuff still goes with you. But at the same time, you do gain this greater perspective and it
Mhm.
will be unique to you, right?
Right.
Because you're right. I mean, let's say, for example, in life, you really did a lot of damage. And we know this happens like with parents that were maybe abusive and they passed and they come back to their family members and they say, gee, wow, I really see how I hurt you now. And I didn't
Yeah.
see that, or I didn't care when I was in my physical body. But now that I'm here, I see those things. And so there is that greater perspective. And I think some of the soul contracts you're talking about are like, let's say someone has a soul contract to maybe, and this sounds horrible, but maybe they're going to end up being a murderer, or they're going to kill somebody, or they're going to commit crimes, or they're going to do things that are really difficult, right? It's
Yeah.
like as they move on and they transition, that's going to be a very unique experience for them when they transition to have to look at those types of things.
Right. So my understanding of it is that if you don't really deal with problems in life properly, then we do carry these burdens with us.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because this just came up in the reading I just had was about karmic cycles, and
Mhm.
it's almost like family cycles where we kind of, when we come in, we don't know it in life, but when we come in with these contracts of, okay, we're going to try to resolve some of this karma from the past, maybe from past lives.
Mhm.
And in doing so, we have to play this role for each other
Right.
and let it unfold. And then we have to allow the choices that we make to really reveal whether or not we learned that lesson. So,
Right.
or how well we learned the lesson, and how we applied it in life and what we could have done better, because
Mhm.
we know about the fact that, you know, we go through some sort of um life review, right,
Right.
where we are basically put in front of the people that we've hurt, or we're made to feel, um you know, the pain
Mhm.
that we inflicted on others and vice versa.
It's an
So
accountability is the word that I use. Accountability.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, though, even though someone may seem like a hard ass in life, um, it might have been for a kind of reason, I guess, and or an opportunity for them to resolve some of that karma.
Mhm.
And in hindsight,
Mhm.
we really see it much more clearly. And that's why we still retain our personalities, but we get like a nicer version, because we get the higher self of the ego that says, I could have done better. I see now how I could have done
Mhm.
better. And there's more room for forgiveness in that space, which is
There
why
is.
mediumship is magical, because it allows that bridge to connect.
It
And
does.
then,
It allows the communication after the evaluation.
right.
I know that's so beautifully said. That's very true. That's very true. That's part of the healing because it
Mhm.
allows the relationship and the bond to continue to move on without waiting for, let's say a parent passes away, right? Which we expect to happen. And then the child still has to be on earth for another 30 years. So the parent now is in limbo for even though time is a little different, the parent's basically in limbo and the child's in limbo because there's all of this unresolved stuff. So that is
Yeah.
definitely a gift in mediumship where spirit can step forward and apologize, atone, explain, share perceptions,
Mhm, mhm.
which can enlighten both parties and allow healing to take place. You said so many
Exactly.
different things in there that I wanted to address. I like that you brought up a couple of points, and one of them is we do get asked to be accountable or to have a life review and kind of to say, oh wow, here's how what I did in life caused pain for others. But and I think this in your work, if we're not ready to move on, we don't have to, right? So we
Right.
don't lose our choice to make a decision because we also know that some spirits come through and they're like, no, I haven't looked at my crap yet.
Right. Right.
I'm not ready. I don't
'Cause they
want
don't want to
to.
face it,
They don't want to
essentially.
face it. Maybe it's
Mhm.
too painful. Maybe they're still kind of being a little bit of a butt.
Yeah.
And so again, you don't lose your power to choose. It's not like they pop you from here and they pop you into there. And
Right.
so death doesn't erase who we are. It depends on the person. They can still remain in this crappy space, or they can really evaluate and say, okay, I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to grow. I'm ready to be accountable. I'm ready to take this experience to the next level. Um, I think another thing that I'll share, and then I have a question for you is I'm going to use alcoholics is what's coming up for an example, right? So let's
Okay.
say someone was an alcoholic in life and they were a little bit abusive and they get on the other side and they look at the things that they did and how it affected people. And they talk about, I'm working, I'm healing, I'm
Yes.
growing. I'm not, some
Yes.
people are still drinking on the other side and having a happy party time, which is
That's
like, okay, how does
also
that
true.
work?
Yeah.
But then others go, I'm still healing. So when we get these messages, it's very clear that we just don't go from I'm an alcoholic here to I'm perfect on the other side.
Exactly.
They're still going through the healing. They've just chosen to take that next step. But there was something you were saying, and I know that this happens in your work. What about people who don't want to go to the next step? or people who were bad in life. And we here on earth kind of feel like they're getting away with things, right?
Yeah, I've dealt with that
It's like, where's the
concept a lot.
justice,
Ugh.
right? Is there justice in
There
that?
is, and my understanding of it is that again, we don't know what that person's contract was to come into this life.
Mhm.
What catalyst they might be playing in someone else's life, even the
Right.
world. And I guess what it boils down to, in my understanding, is if you don't decide to deal with it, you're just gonna kind of stay stuck. You don't progress. You kind of end up
Which is true in
spewing,
this life too. So I don't want people to
right.
I don't want
So I
people to
mean,
think that that's a scary thing, is the only reason I say
it
that.
kind well, to me, I guess that's a scary thing.
It's a sad thing. It's a sad
It's
thing.
it can, well, and then again, time isn't a thing. So how long per se it's taking them to actually decide? Because I do feel like at any point in time they could decide, okay, I'm ready, I want to take a look at, whatever it
Mhm,
is that I
mhm,
did wrong.
mhm.
But in the meantime that they're not, I feel like there is a level of suffering, so it's not like they're getting away with it. And in some ways that is their atonement, that is their punishment, because they are refusing
Mhm.
to acknowledge what they've done.
Right.
Now when they're
I
ready,
agree. Yes.
when
Yeah.
they're ready to take accountability and they're ready to
Mhm.
apologize or ask for forgiveness and try to make those things right, that's where they can start to make plans for like their next life or whatever it is that they need to do, that they can progress. So even though, especially with horrible people, I would wish hell upon them forever, that's not exactly how it works. they
Right.
they might be suffering on a
Mhm.
certain level, um but I'm not sure that it's forever, and I'm not sure that we would want that anyways, because we all have times when we fuck up. So,
Right. No, no, no. Very true. That's
you
true.
know,
I think I was kind of using though an example of, someone that we would consider extreme, someone that had killed
even the
someone or
extreme, I know it
right.
sucks, but even the
Right.
extremes, they get to say, you know what, I'm sorry. I realized that this was really, really wrong.
Right.
It could be some kind of karmic thing that they had to go through to essentially get to that point.
Mhm.
So it's not without atonement. That's all I heard. It's like you can be mad that they're forgiven, but that says something more about you than it does them, right?
Right. And it's hard in the human existence to embrace that, especially if it's happened to us personally,
Yeah.
because there is that sense of wanting justice or revenge or whatever word that we want to use with that. You're
Or
right.
that it's not fair
Or
and
that
that,
it's not fair.
yeah.
Exactly. Why did that person's life get cut short when they were a good person and then you're a bad person and then here you are continuing to get to live out your life?
Well, my
And
biggest
so,
thing is,
yeah.
why do you get, it's not fair because you can do all these bad things and then seemingly get away with it, is what it feels like. But
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
not getting, you're not really going to get away with anything. And anybody that
You're
thinks that
you're
they
not.
will,
Right. Right.
sorry, that's not
Yeah.
the way it works.
It
So,
doesn't change. I mean, it's good to know this life lesson that and to talk about these kind of things. And this topic's going to come up again in life lesson number 3 and a couple of the
right.
others, because
Yeah.
all of these lessons really intertwine one with another. We were trying to make it linear just for the sake of conversation and sharing them with
Right.
people
Or simple concepts to more
to more
advanced.
advanced
Right.
concepts, right? And this can become an advanced concept because if you think in terms of traditional Christianity, and I can't speak to Islam, and you could probably more, but there's good and there's bad. It's like if
Mhm.
you're good, then you're okay. If you're bad, you go to the bad place. So
Right.
everything's very black and white. And I think this is more of our mindset in this dimension, in this world, that that's the way that it works, but that really isn't the way that the divine or the spiritual world works. It's very
Right.
different.
Right. So I just saw a thing that said something about how Christianity addresses everyone as a born sinner, right? And immediately it came to my mind, it's like, we're not born sinners, but we are born with free will. And this free will is the choice that gives you the option to sin. It's not that you're born a bad person. You might have come into this life with a whole heap of karma, okay, that you have to go through. But that still doesn't make you a bad person, because in my opinion, if you're coming back at some point, you probably did with the idea that, oh, hopefully you're gonna be advancing at some point, right? Now, I will say that that's not entirely true for everyone. And again, when we were talking about good versus evil, there is a certain kind of evil that does not care to get better. They really only care to continue to destroy. So there is going to be a difference between the two. You know, versus somebody who's just kind of a bad person and going through karmic issues, or versus somebody that's
or making bad choices and bad decisions, versus
just,
that person that has some serious hate in their heart.
right.
But, yeah.
And I don't have all the answers as far as what happens in those types of situations, but I do feel like people continuously get chances to make it better. And the forgiveness doesn't come from you know, anyone else but yourself,
Right.
really. Essentially, you have to be
very true.
at the point where you're ready and willing to admit that you were the one that did something. You need to ask for the forgiveness, and it's just kind of like an admittance of fault, right?
And at that point, when you admit and you say you're ready to go forward, that's when kind of the justice and because then that's when you're ready to bear the brunt and take accountability. That's again the word I'm going to use.
Yeah.
And at that point, you didn't get off scot-free from it, right?
Exactly.
The accountability now,
and even if you don't want to face it, you're still going to go through,
right,
whatever you're going through. So whether that's guilt, shame, etc., that's how it's going to play out.
Yeah, very true. You bring up some really good things, is that this is a flawed dimension, right? I mean, it's even though we aren't necessarily born into sin, when we come into human form, we know it's going to be a difficult life. We know that there's going to be challenges. We know that we're going to make mistakes. I'm with you. I don't like the fact of saying we're a born sinner, but I understand the basic concept behind it. We're all going to make mistakes.
Right.
No one is perfect.
Exactly.
Again, there's those intentions, though. Did you do it intentionally? Did you do it knowing that it was the wrong thing to do? Did you have a conscience about it? You know, it doesn't matter. At some point, we're going to be held accountable. But those are very difficult things in this life to accept. And we don't know the fullness of why we're living the life that we're living, or why the other person is living the life that they are.
Right.
And that's where we're asked not to judge.
Right. And again, going back to, because you brought up the alcoholic thing, and
it's such a common theme.
Right. Well, the other thing that I was thinking was this idea that we place blame instead of accountability for our actions that are bad to others, because somebody else did this to me, so I'm going to do it to them. Or meaning, when you brought up the alcoholic thing, it's like, well, my dad was an alcoholic and he drank his ass off, so that's why I'm an alcoholic too, and I just do this, that, and the other. That's, to me, a bullshit excuse.
Well, there's no accountability in that. You're just giving
right.
yourself an excuse to make a poor choice.
Two different sides to that. You can say, my dad was an alcoholic and that's why I don't drink, or my dad was an alcoholic and I'm an alcoholic too. Right. So that's why it's free will. It's not about, I was born an alcoholic and I was born into sin and I was just destined to do this. Even though that might be part of your karma, because that could be part of your life. It could be part of something that you have to deal with, but you still, at the end of the day, you have that free will choice to say, you know what, I'm going to break the cycle. I'm not going to be doing that. And I'm going to raise the bar. So
absolutely.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up here was the ego does not die or disappear. Some people, maybe I don't want to say that they're wrong, but I don't subscribe to people that say when we die, we go straight to source and we don't like maintain
That's
our
a,
ego
I love
self,
this point. Yes. Keep
right?
going. Right. Mm-hmm.
And that also when we reincarnate, that somehow that ego self is not able to be accessed on the other side. And I don't subscribe to any of that. I've heard some mediums say that, and I'm like, no, 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 no.
Mm.
Why? Because time's not really a thing. Okay, we're going to talk more about stuff like that, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
it's just not relevant. So your ego self on the other side maintains the personality. You stay pretty close to the same. You might be a better elevated version of that ego self
Mm-hmm.
after, you've gone through your life review and all of these things. And but you don't just disappear. You don't, when you're ready to go into the next life, that ego self stays on the other side. Now, if we're all connected to the oversoul and the higher self, or your higher self, meaning
These are definitely advanced concepts, but keep
yeah,
going.
okay, it might be that when you reincarnate, you have less energy to devote to this ego self should someone want to connect with it, but it doesn't go away. And it doesn't mean that you can't. Meaning, why would I be able to connect with I don't know who, somebody really far back from the old Shakespeare? Okay,
Right.
why would I be able to connect with him, or Tesla, for example?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If he, time's not a thing, he could easily be reincarnated right now into some little kid that's
Right.
inventing all kinds of stuff. But somehow I'm able to connect with this ego, right, on the
Right.
other side still.
Right.
So that's kind of the point, is that the ego does not just die or disappear, or even like disappear into the source, is what I'm saying.
I
Now,
completely agree. I completely agree. Right.
right now, I don't know, like, I don't know if that's true for everyone. I don't know, but from my experience,
Mhm.
that's what I would say. Is it just, otherwise it doesn't make any sense. Why would you be able to connect with
Mhm.
people that are on the other side that have died hundreds of years ago,
Mhm.
right?
Right. No, exactly. And I think that those are excellent points. I don't know if that'll make people confused or not. So I hope not. And because these are life lessons learned through mediumship. So these are things that we have come to learn over a period of time of
Right.
communicating in sessions, or, having spirit share things with us. And I remember that was a big fear of mine, that when I died, I was just going to stop being Carol. And that still felt like death. It
Right.
still felt like I was going to go to the other side, and then suddenly I was going to stop being me. So in many ways, the me that is Carol still was really afraid of that. And
Yeah.
then I
Yeah.
realized, but wait a minute. And I didn't realize it took a period of time. It took the mediumship, right? It took all of these connections for me to start to say, you're absolutely right. The ego can remain, but I'm more than my ego. I'm still a soul. So it's like, here's the big soul, right? Here's the big part of me. And if you imagine all of these little bubbles inside the soul, inside the big soul, are all of these different personalities.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like, I am a little bubble, but I'm
Yeah.
still the big bubble at the
Yes.
same time. That's a really hard concept to grasp.
I know. I
I
know.
totally get it.
I know. And I keep coming back to further deeper realizations into it, because
Yes.
I
Same
understand the
here.
concept, and I've heard
Mhm.
it before, I've said it before. But even recently I had, more information
Right.
come in that
It
just,
takes a period of time for you to be able to really feel that I'm still me, but I'm not me.
yes.
It takes a period of time. So I
Mhm.
guess from this life lesson, because we could talk about the ego and the oversoul, and we certainly can do that some more and get very more specific about it, is not to be afraid that you're going to lose who you are. It's going to
Right.
come through. But I'm also going to give examples of the soul coming through in a mediumship session as opposed to the personality. So, what do I mean by that? Right. And the soul can come through even when the personality is still alive in the physical world.
Oh yeah, yeah. Isn't
So,
that crazy?
this really is an example of the fact that, I'll use an example of, let's say, a child that is impaired and can't speak for themselves. Or I've also had a sitting where the woman was mentally, even though she was adult, she was mentally incompetent and was in a facility. The soul came through to the living sister,
Yeah.
and the soul is attached to the physical ego that is in this world.
Right.
And the soul is explaining, I'm having this experience over here that you know as your sister, and here's what's taking place and why.
Right.
So that's when you start really blowing your mind to realizing there's something part of you that's already in the spiritual realm. There's already
Mm-hmm.
a part of you there.
Yeah,
That's your
because
soul.
I feel like sometimes when we're not connected to our higher selves, and I don't even mean the higher self, I feel like there's another, like you have you and the, like right now, your conscious thoughts and whatever here.
Mhm, mhm.
And then you have your higher ego self, which is like your
Yes.
higher,
And then there's that
and then
other
there's
layer
another
that's
one.
even above that. And
Yes.
that's really powerful. And that's that higher, not the higher self of the ego, but the higher soul.
Right.
That's the part that has all the other personalities wrapped up in it. That's where the past lives come from, because your
Right.
soul is saying, here's another life experience that we've had, and here's how it's relevant to you as Carol, this personality. These things all intermingle, but
Mhm.
it's
Because
so trippy.
I know, because what happens in astral is that 9 times out of 10, I'm dealing with this higher ego self. So it's not the higher self, it's the higher
Mhm.
ego self. Um, and in which case they're sometimes very connected and sometimes not. So it highly depends on the person. But yes, this deeper understanding of
Mhm.
just how, I guess, many levels there are to you.
Right. How complicated, how vast is the better word, how
Yes.
vast we really are. And I think
Mhm.
that's the point through the mediumship, as we start to recognize, even if the ego has passed on and transitioned, I will say sometimes when there's a mediumship session, sometimes the soul steps forward to give a message to the loved one, not just the ego, the soul. The soul
Yes,
says,
yes.
this was my life lesson. This was what and it's not coming from the personality. It's coming from up here. And I
Mhm,
can
mhm.
feel that difference. And I try to convey that to the sitter. And generally it's a sitter who is capable of understanding that concept, right?
Okay, yeah.
It's because most of us want to talk to the ego. I want to talk to my father, the
Yeah.
ego, not my father,
Mhm.
the soul. I want to talk to my father, my ego,
Right. Yeah, yeah,
or his
yeah.
ego.
My
And it's
dad.
true.
Yeah.
That's the relationship that I'm interested in right now.
Mhm.
Not that if his soul came through, I wouldn't be curious to hear from it. But as a general rule, the ego is the relationship that we're bound to at this point in time. And that's what's
Right.
going to come through. So I
Definitely.
guess let's bring this down, like, because we can talk about the oversoul and all of this, and I love it. It's a wonderful, they're wonderful learnings that come from exploring your consciousness, from exploring mediumship, spiritual connections, and really realizing how amazing and how vast we are. And that was the point that Spirit wants to make, is that we're not just this.
Right.
We're so
It's
much
so much more.
more, so
Mhm.
much more. And we're more than the bad things that we've done, or the bad things that someone else is doing that you look at and you say that's a horrible person. And you're right, we don't know the karma, we don't know the lesson, we don't know the contracts. So how do you take this and learn from it? I think we talked about in life lesson number 1, don't fear death, and don't fear that you're going to go away. You get to ride out in this ego as long as you want to.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's what I understand
you
too.
can you can as long as you want to. And you can go off and have other experiences as your ego self, whether you want to hold yourself accountable and move forward, but still as your ego, or whether you don't want to be accountable and you just want to kind of keep on floating.
Right.
That's your decision. It's your choice. It's okay. So don't
Yeah.
fear that you're going to lose who you are, but you will be asked to look at your life and say, are you ready to go to that next step?
Right.
and you get to choose. You don't lose choice when you die. It's
Exactly.
not, you are going to go here now and this will happen to you. Free will is a universal constant regardless of the dimension.
I will say though that your energetic vibration will decide for you where you will end
It
up.
does, but that was still a choice. You
Exactly.
chose
But
to not change.
do
You
you see what I
chose
mean
to
though?
not
So it's
grow
like
or be
if you
accountable.
exactly, it's just that's why I feel like there is a place for religion in some ways, because what does religion tell you to do but live your life in such a way that would be beneficial. At least that's what they're supposed to be teaching. This
Mhm,
is
mhm, mhm.
the purpose of religion in my mind, is that this is supposed to give us a bridge to spirituality, um and some kind of faith in an afterlife. And I guess my point there is just that if we're not working on ourselves in life
Mhm.
and trying to reach a certain vibration,
But you
it's
know, that's variable. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think you're accurate to a point, but you can also, again, let's talk about that alcoholic abusive parent, right? And they pass over. And
mhm,
it's like they're given grace. They're given a moment to say, are you willing to look at this? Even though they might have
right.
been an ass in life, right? They're
Yeah,
still
absolutely.
given that moment of grace. Their vibration when they passed as an ego may have been crap, but
Right,
they're not just suddenly, okay, you lived a life that was really crappy and there's no moment, there's no point of forgiveness or no point of grace. That is not the case either.
right. I agree with that.
That is
100%
not
I
the
agree.
case. You
Yeah.
are always given the opportunity to evolve, change, and grow. You do not have to wait for death for that to happen. That's the point of this life lesson. Do
Right.
it now.
Do it now.
Do it
Yes.
now. Because if you don't do it now, you will do it. You
Eventually.
will do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. It's
Will
like get
do
it
it.
done now so that you don't have to deal with it in the afterlife. You don't want to.
Right.
And it's actually, from my understanding, it's a million times easier to do it now than it is to try to
It
wait.
is. And you know, I often hear from spirits that say that their transition was so much easier because they dealt with so much stuff when they were in their physical life. They
Yes.
said that they loved people. They said that they forgived people. They made those conscious efforts to evolve in the physical life. And it was kind of like they didn't go to a better place, but they were already free of all of that. So
Yeah.
they were able to take that next step and really just run with it, right?
Right, right. It's
Because they
kind of
didn't have to
like,
do all the work when they were already there.
right. It's kind of like how, if I skip doing dishes at night and I wake up in the morning and they're still there,
Great example. Love
I
it.
have to deal with it. But if
And
I
now you've
just,
got more dishes to go
right.
through.
But if
And
I
then
had
pretty soon
just
it feels
done them
overwhelming.
the night before, I would have woke up and been like,
Love that.
yay.
Love that. Love that. That's a perfect example, though. And I will know that in this life, I'm being said, look, if you want to deal with this, deal with it now. You're not going to want to have to deal with it when you're over here. And this is a relationship from my past that I still am struggling with. And I'm talking about my childhood. So if anybody's like, she's talking about me, like, no, I'm
Hey,
talking
if
about
the
from my
shoe fits,
childhood.
Cinderella.
But it's like I can hear spirit saying, are you willing to look at this? And I went, nope, nope, I'm still angry. I'm
Yeah.
still not ready. And I know I'm going to have to do it, but it's not, I'm just not ready.
Yeah. I
And
understand.
and that's okay. And you can be on the other side and not be ready. But the
Mhm.
more I think that we evolve here, and again, I love that expression, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I truly believe that that is what that biblical verse means, although I think it means so much more than that.
Right.
We create our heaven now.
Yeah.
Deal with the crap now to the best of your ability, because it will go with you. And whether it's 5 years on this dimension or 100 years later when you're in the spiritual realm or your next step, it's going to come back
Yeah.
and you're going
Yeah.
to have
Because
to deal with it.
karma is a thing you can't just get rid of. it has to be worked through. It has to be transmuted. So,
And being willing to learn the lesson from it is a part of that too. I think it's not just about, okay, well, I'm going to forgive that person, or I'm going to not be angry anymore, or whatever. It's really about digging down, figuring out what was the real life lesson out of that. And
right.
we hear that so much from spirit. This is how this life experience changed me. This is what I learned. This is how my soul evolved, right?
Yeah, so many say if I knew then what I
Mhm,
know now,
mhm.
I would have lived my life differently.
And that's going to be
That
true for all of us. And we can't beat ourselves up for our mistakes either.
right. But
So
learn from them.
we
Learn
learn from them.
learn
Yep.
is and that's just it. So if you deal with the crap that you have now, you are essentially learning from those mistakes now. You don't have to carry it with you
Right.
on the other side. So, I mean, granted,
Yes.
the personality portions of it, meaning like if you're an asshole, you're an asshole. It's fine. You might still be an asshole, but you're just going to be a little bit nicer than you were before.
Potentially.
Yeah, potentially.
Oh, well, so did you have anything more from spirit? I know, like we had
No,
said
I
in life
think we've
lesson
touched
number
on all
one,
my
we,
points. Yeah.
okay, perfect. Good. All right. So I want to take this opportunity because again, in life lesson number one, we shared some insights that you got from spirit, some insights that I got from spirit, and I have some more that I would like to read. This is a little bit longer than the last one was, so I apologize for that. It really just reiterates everything that you and I have been talking about, so there isn't anything different in it.
Right.
Um, but this is a channeled body of work. Basically, I just sit, I let spirit give me the words, and I type exactly what I hear. I will be making this an available PDF download, so the link will be in the show notes. So that if people want to download it and read it for themselves, they can. Because I think when you read this stuff, it sinks in, or it gives you a new meaning that you don't get when you listen to me
Sure.
read it.
Everybody's a little different that way.
Everybody
Yeah.
gets something a little bit different out of it. Yeah. All right, so this would, again, if you're following the PDF, this is a little bit further down because I'm pulling this section out because it matches this life lesson. So it says, while the body itself and the experience that you are living in this dimension will seemingly drop away, the essence of your consciousness is in you now, and the essence of that consciousness will continue as you move into the spiritual realm. We are not here to tell you that life will be perfect when you arrive, but we will welcome you with open and loving arms and will assist you on your journey to whatever the next level or step is based on your personal choices. We and source, and they were using the word source in here to mean God. Depending on who's communicating, I hear God. This particular time I heard source. So we, meaning the spirits that were communicating, and source, do not dictate the next steps, the next levels, or what it is that you wish to overcome. These are for you to decide. Some arrive in the spiritual realms joyful, happy, and proud that they are free of the body and are able to once again be their young and joyful selves. We applaud these experiences, for the life that you have just lived has been precious and sacred, and you should arrive here and take joy and pride in that experience. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just as a parent seeks to give their children joyful childhood experiences, the source and we in spirit want you to have the best possible life. And so when you arrive, we want you to celebrate that life. We, or should we say source, shall at some point ask you to evaluate your life. We in the spiritual realms are being requested by source to ask you to do these things for your highest good. When you examine the life, when you are ready, you will be able to evaluate those things that you did well, those things that need improvement, those things for which you are accountable. There is no punishment, but in the accountability, you begin to understand the greater lessons at play so that you may continue to evolve and grow and move your consciousness forward into its next joyful experience. So they go on to say, we here in spirit would like to assure you that life is not perfect for us either. I think that's really important, because how often do we think that the other side is perfect, right? And
Yeah.
they're saying that's not the case. While some of us have advanced and are better at managing our issues and our concerns, we also struggle with our own growth, with our own progression. For it is a never ending journey to return ourselves back to the vastness of Source, even while knowing that we will never be the fullness of Source. This is the joy of consciousness, in that it continues to expand on and on, ever moving forward joyfully, gleefully, but also striving to understand, to become, and to seek to understand the vastness that is the Source. We in spirit may feel as if we exude more love, more knowledge, and more understanding, for we exist in a greater place of clarity. This is no different than a parent who understands what the child is asking, and as a parent seeks to give its best possible, most loving advice. We here in spirit, however, acknowledge that we too have limitations, expectations, and agendas. We hope, however, that you will understand that as you connect with more advanced and higher beings of consciousness, that they are here to represent for you the best and highest of their possible good. We understand that people fear connections with spirit, and these may sometimes be well-founded, for not all people have connections that are positive. But we want to assure you that when one turns to the Source for guidance and clarity and understanding, they are seeking the pureness of all that is. And in that request, they shall be answered. This again will come in loving forms, and it may come in terms of loving spirits who can best shine a light on those initial questions and requests. So that kind of sums it up. You can tell that they were transitioning into a new topic at the end of that paragraph, but I
Mhm.
thought it was really clear to talk about. They talk about spirits being at different levels. They're growing. They have agendas. They have expectations. They have tasks to complete. They are still living life because there's no death.
Right, right.
So I love that that was shared there. So I know you had a couple of comments, and so did I. Back
Yeah.
in the first paragraph, what kind of popped up there for you, if anything?
Oh, so when you were talking about souls going back and living their life like
Yes,
as a child. Yeah,
yes, going back to those happy times.
right. And I had an experience like that where I crossed over a gal, um and anybody that would have come across that lady would have thought she was totally evil and horrible and whatever, because she was really in the negative.
Mhm,
But after having talked with her and helping
mhm,
her go through or moving through some of it, whatever, um, I had received the information that she did indeed cross and everything was cool. And she showed me herself as a kid,
mhm,
which was validation for the information that I got, um, for her, because she didn't get to have
mhm,
a childhood at all. Like it wasn't happy if it
mhm.
was. So
Right, right.
um so that was really interesting. I think that when we say that we don't change, maybe that's not entirely true, I guess. So you can
Well,
change,
that's
yes,
true.
but
I mean, that's true. Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's
yeah,
a good point to make. Right. Yeah.
right. So I
But
mean,
you're still you. You're
but
just a you in a happier moment or a happier
exactly.
time.
Yeah.
Because the body falls away. It's a different dimension. You're still you. And it's like we all have a hard time grasping. What is that like? I know I still do. But
Hmm.
how often do we hear a loved one come through and say, oh my gosh, I'm dancing again. We're having so much fun. And they're just out there having a good time. They're living their life. So it's not all serious and
That's my
growth and
grandma. She loves to dance.
yeah. So I love that that came up in the channeling, because we were talking about this heavy topic, but they want you to applaud the life. It's sacred,
Yeah,
it's fun, it's joyful. We've had good times in this life, not just bad times. It's not all serious.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
enjoy the you that you are, when you get to the other side, all of the good
right,
things. It's not just the bad stuff. Yeah.
right,
I
right.
thought that was a very beautiful part in that paragraph as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that you were talking about, you're never going to be outside of God, even source, whatever they're talking about, source.
Their term for God, right?
Right, it's like you're never going to be outside of that. So anybody that tries to claim things like
Right.
you are God or I am God or stuff like that, it's not entirely false, but it's also not entirely true. And
Exactly. It's like,
there's
right.
a
Yes.
danger, I feel, with people that are spreading that kind of, I guess, exaggeration is what I would call it. It's an exaggeration of the idea that we are a part of God and that we are vast, like we were just talking about. We are capable of so much more than we think.
Right.
But don't fool yourself. You are not the creator of the universe.
Right.
And
And
the other thing,
that's what this says here, right? It's
right.
like, yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about that came to mind was Jedi, which is super easy for a lot of people to relate to, right? But it's this idea that all it takes is this horrible harboring of anger and pain in someone to become a Sith, and you might be powerful. We'll try not to swear. You might be really, really powerful, but if you're not working in the positive, you're working in the negative. And so early on in my development, that was kind of a big advice. It was like, you need to make sure you're in the light. You need to make sure that you continue to gravitate toward this light.
Right.
Stay.
Because it's true, because we all know that negative still has power, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
go on
right,
the dark
right.
side. So that was all I wanted to make about
Great
that.
point.
I think it's super easy for us to think that even these evolved spiritual guides don't have faults or problems or issues, but I think they do on some levels, because they still have free will, like you're talking about. They could easily
And I think, and they were very clear to say that it depends on who you're connecting with too, right? I mean, if you connect with your dad who just passed, last year, and he was battling alcoholism and anger and a lot of pain and suffering, and you connect with that again, your advice from that individual is going to be very different than the advice you might get from someone who has advanced in the spiritual realms, and their role now is to serve as a teacher to people in the physical dimension. The advice that you get from those two people is going to be very different. And I learned that very early on in my mediumship, is just because it comes from spirit doesn't mean you need to take their advice. And we've talked about that time and time again. Don't ever give your power up. The more advanced the spirits are, the more careful they are about the types of information and advice that they give you, because they will respect spiritual laws.
Which is why when I ask spirit for information for readings and for other people, my always question is, what do these people need to know for their highest good? What is the highest good possible? Right. So,
and I love that too, because if I'm doing a sitting for someone, the reason, you go to my website and it says, I'll connect with your spiritual team, because I want to get the highest and best information I can for you. If that means your father that you had a horrible relationship with comes through, because that's the healing that needs to take place, then that's what will take place. But it might be more about what you need to do to move forward and what spirit wants you to know. I want the highest source possible for your best good, for my best capability to come through to advise you. I don't want to get that psychically. Psychic information, even if it's accurate, can be very, very flawed. That's coming through my filter.
Yep.
Now, that's not to say that spirit still doesn't come through my filter, but just like when I channel information, my goal is to take it from the highest possible place.
Yeah.
So I love that they brought that in here too, because it talks about the fact that it's not here bad, they're good. That's not the way that it is. Here can be
Right.
bad and good, and there can be bad and good, and there's levels here
Exactly.
and there's levels there.
I know, I know. I think people think, well, it'll be fine when I die. Everything will be
Everything
better.
will be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. Will it?
It's just
You
like
know?
this life. There's good and bad, and I hate to even use the word bad. There's challenges and different experiences, and it's all based on who you are. So
Right.
I did like this. So thank you for letting me share those couple of paragraphs. Because I never know what's going to come through. And I liked that they admitted that they're human, even though they're
Yeah,
maybe
right.
not human.
Maybe they're not even human, but they're infallible for sure.
But and I'm hearing them say right now, we are not source. They just said that we're not
Yeah,
source. That's what, and I'm
right.
like, well, so that means that they're subject to their experiences,
Right.
but we can certainly respect when that information comes from a high source, and that high source feels very powerful. It feels very different than it does when you're dealing with a lower energy. So for those of you that are out there that are mediums,
Definitely.
or you're connecting with energies and spirits, get to a point where you know what it feels like in your body, and your vibration changes, the energy changes. You might be swept over with love as opposed to feeling a little nauseous, or your signs and symbols will be different. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
But yeah.
So any last words on life lesson number 2? Is I think we've really hit home a
I don't
lot of
have anything
topics
else.
on you're not you, but you are you. You will continue to be you, but you can be more than you.
Right. I guess I will say, because now that you said that, just popped into my head about how the soul can be in multiple places at one time.
Mhm.
Um, so I mean, I don't know why that's important, but apparently it
No, it
needed
was
to come
popping
out.
up for me too, because I think you had talked earlier about, the past lives a little bit. And this again may kind of, because some people may be watching this and going, well, I don't know that I believe in past lives. And we think that past lives are consecutive, right? Because if we look at them
Right.
linear, it's like, well, I have this life, but then Carol has to die so that she can become Sheba Ali in the next life or something. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
so how do I stop? Well, you really don't, because Carol can continue to be existing, doing whatever she's doing, because this is different expression of the soul, which is why I
Right.
agree with you that I can still connect with the ego regardless of whether they've incarnated. I don't
Exactly.
subscribe to that either. I don't believe that
Exactly.
that's
And also, I will add that
Mhm.
I think the angels want that message to come out, because so many people really kind of claim these relationships with Archangel Michael and Archangel Raphael and all of these different archangels. And maybe sometimes people think like, well, I'm not good enough, or for them to come to me, or they're already dealing with this person. How could they possibly be dealing with me too?
Mhm.
Um,
Oh yeah, we had talked about this, and I think
and
this
so
is going
I
to
think
come
it's
up.
important for
Right.
people to understand that you're not taking away from someone else's time by asking for this interaction with an
Right.
angel or
Right.
somebody else.
Right. Very true. Very, very true. I did hear a caveat very briefly, though, when we were talking about, I'm going to give an example to make this simple. Let's say someone, and I'm sorry if this is sensitive, it's just the best way I can think of maybe to give this example. Someone has a child that dies, perhaps at birth or very young, right? And they want to connect with that child in spirit. And so there may be a little bit of information that comes through, but then also what comes through is that child has reincarnated, okay, and is now living in this lifetime with that parent, but either as a different child or as a niece or something like that. So those things can happen, okay? And so it may not be in the best interest to really connect a lot with the child that passed. Do you see what I'm saying? So even though that ego has passed, it didn't have a full viable life. There's not really any benefit from knowing more about that ego, because that experience is now in the new child, and that's going to carry forward. So it's a little complicated. Um,
I think that's a very good point.
It's a specific, well, Spirit made it. They were like,
I was gonna say,
caveat,
yeah,
kids reincarnating.
right.
You've got to be careful, I think, is what they're kind of saying to me. It's like the life path of the child that didn't live is, there's another opportunity. There's still purpose in that, right? There's still purpose in that experience, even though it doesn't feel like it. Or maybe the body just wasn't as viable as it needed to be, because things do happen. And so they come back in a new baby, right? In a new life. The
Right.
value of knowing what happened up here may not be relevant because you're still playing it all out.
Sure. I can
That's a
understand
real
that.
exception.
Yeah, I can understand that though. I mean, there's still going to be a lesson involved. I guess what it would be to me is like, if you did have to connect with that soul, it would be for some sort of healing purpose, probably for the parents. And it would be most likely a one-time kind of thing. And, that new child would be, and I don't, because we get into a lot of weird specifics, but if the new child was in the same family, that could have more weight. But if the new child was like, let's say in a different family, that would be a little
There's a
different.
lot of implications from that. And I think that's kind of what Spirit was bringing forward. It was like, I just had another example pop into my head. Your grandfather passes away. He reincarnates as your sister's son, right? And it's like,
Right.
what value does it have? Because you're still living the same life. So if you want to connect with your grandfather at a mediumship session, even though there's a part of his soul that's reincarnated as your sister's son, you're still going to be able to do that. But whether or not that connection is limited, maybe there's something karmic going on between those incarnations where you're not going to get the full picture.
That could be true.
And we don't know, because we're still living with that same soul in the same birth line, right?
Right.
So
that makes sense. I mean, and so, yeah, you're right. We should bring up specific points like that, because not everything is going to be the same. Every single reading, every single case, they're all so different.
They're all very different. And I have to say, it's only been very, very rare occasions where the reincarnation immediately within the same family has come up. So I don't have a lot of specifics for that, but you've also heard other mediums who talk about it. So I think it's a case by case basis. But
I think that's probably true. That's probably true. I would just say though that because of the spiritual nature, we're able to be in multiple places with multiple people.
Right. We are not bound by time, right? You talked about that in the first life lesson, the 3D world that we're in versus the 5D world where time and space are not limited. And so we become so much more, right?
Absolutely. So for example, one time, when somebody had passed, I had just kind of briefly asked the question, so what's it like now on the other side? And their response was expansive. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting.
That's a good word. Right.
Yeah. And also because this person was famous, and so they were talking about like their death over the radio and stuff like that. And I found his response to be really profound, because everybody's talking about you, everybody's sad, everybody's, so how do you, I guess, offer consolation to only certain people? Or it's not like that. It's like, it's expansive. You can
I see right
at the same time. So I found that to be really insightful and something to think about, I guess.
Right. No, very true. Very true. Yes. And even, if you listen to the experiences of people who've had the stories of people who've had near-death experiences, they talk about their consciousness. We don't have to walk to get somewhere. It's like you think it and you're there. It is just instantaneous. It's like they would be, in the hospital room, and then the next thing they know, they would be in the lobby with a loved one. And then they'd think about another person that was in a house that was 5 states away, and they would be in the house with them.
Again,
it's instantaneous.
The movie What Dreams May Come kind of plays on that in the beginning, where they kind of show him going from like point A to point B, like super quick, like and you think it's time changing, but it's not. And it's
really, like quantum fast, right? It's like boom, 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 boom.
Yeah. So,
Right.
because
Yes.
time's not a thing. So it's really interesting
Yeah.
concepts there.
So these are all wonderful things that we hope we will leave you with today. Obviously, to sum it up, the life lesson is death doesn't erase who we are, so don't fear it. It brings on 1,000 questions. You can tell the things that we've talked about today. This is the
Mhm.
joy I find out of doing readings and hearing what spirit has to say, of channeling, of connecting with consciousness on the other side. This is where I've learned these things. I didn't
Mhm.
learn these from other people because I don't want to listen to other people, what other people have to say. I want to hear what spirit has to say. I want to learn from them because it's
Yeah.
their experience. They're there. So this is why I'm
Right.
always like, there's so many wonderful reasons to explore mediumship. But again, if it's not your cup of tea, you can still have a connection with source, with spirit, with consciousness, with your loved ones. Encourage them to come into your life so that you get an understanding of the vastness that is you. So with that being said, we want to thank all of you for joining us. We hope that you will like and subscribe and share and let us know your thoughts, whether you think we're crazy or whether it really impacted you in a positive way. And we will be doing life lesson number 3. So be sure you subscribe and catch on to that. So thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.